Hey there. On this episode of the Grupo Podcast, we get to talk to a good friend of mine, Ross Gates. He's run amazing Web3 teams, engineering teams of all different types, shapes, and sizes. He's done rapid growth for crypto projects, and it's really exciting to learn his insights on how to structure teams, how to hire talent, but also how to build product. And he was one of the original, I would say, growth hackers in the sense that he really mastered the unconventional ways to attracting customers, clients, getting attention, building personal brand. So it's really exciting to hear his take on how to go about that process. What is growth hacking? What does it really mean? Engineering teams, how do you build them? How you build them at scale? And on top of that, raising immense amounts of funding. He's had such great experience pitching projects, talking to founders, partnerships, building partnerships with companies to test products. So, really exciting to share our conversation and get you an insight into how he's been able to really shape amazing companies and products and what is on the next horizon for Ross. How long has it been since you've taken like a deep breath?
A deep breath?
Like,
Well, I do sing sometimes, so you need all the breath you can get. But as far as like meditating,
Yeah.
a while,
yeah.
probably like 2 or 3 months.
We talk about it so much with like founder coaching, mentoring, all this stuff, but it's hard to like put in practice day to day within the regimen. I just don't know how you in particular say like balanced, because I know how much you work and how much intention you put behind everything you do. And where, totally cliche question, but where did that start? Were you like the kid doing like lawnmower services, knocking on doors, or did you find it along the way?
Just like working hard and like focusing on exactly what you want to do.
Diligence.
I mean, my first job was chipping ice off people's driveways in the winter, where we would go out. I had 3 brothers. I have 3 brothers.
Yeah.
And we would shovel people's driveways and, probably not charge enough. If you're like, hey, your driveway is like 400 feet long, I'll charge you $25 to shovel it. Someone's like, you know what? Sure, we'll do that. But coming home at the end of the day at like 11 years old with $120 in your pocket, lasts you a good long time.
Yeah.
And also lasts you like the next 3 days to recover.
Yeah.
But I'd say probably like the intentional, just working incredibly hard. I mean, I've always worked hard, but like knowing why I'm working hard kind of happened at the end of high school, where I had a conversation with my mom where she goes, you're interested in all these things, but as soon as you know they're possible, they bore you and you move on. Can you just take one project and just like follow it all the way through? I was like, you are right. Like I built 3/4 of a laser. I had my neighbor who was a glass blower.
A laser.
So a helium neon laser. It's basically just a glass tube, mirror at each end, filled with helium neon. You put a high current through anodes at both ends, and then that electricity passes through the gas, which excites it, and then the mirrors make it a laser. So it's.
And what's the purpose of it? It's just to look at a cool laser, or is it like?
The purpose of it was just to prove that you could do it. Like you can buy something for $1 that's going to put a red point on your wall, and that's what I built. Only it cost 300 times more and tons of hours, but it was that long and an inch in diameter, and I had to call up a neon sign shop and get the correct mixture of chemicals and find the right quartz windows and have my friend the glass blower grind the ends at the right angles, because light will pass through and then turn inside the mirror and then go straight again, but only if they're at the right angles. But I never even finished it. I figured out how to do everything. I got all of the pieces, and then I was just like, okay, I'm bored. And stuff like that's just like a regret, where it's like, okay, I should have just put in the extra 20% in.
But what was that first project then that you felt you had enough reason why you were doing it? It was interesting, and I'm assuming it continued to be interesting.
This is going to sound silly, but in college, so my largest purchase in high school was a DSLR camera. And I probably took 500, 600,000 photos with that camera before I stopped doing it. Yeah. So I would always be the family photographer. And every Christmas, I'd make some sort of photo arrangement for my parents of all of my brothers and all the shenanigans we were up to. So in college, I got a grant to essentially make a photo display that I'd created in CAD and learn how to mass produce it. Not that it was successful by any means. It was my first foray into creating a consumer product and selling it to people. But I didn't give up on it until I exhausted every single opportunity of it possibly being successful. I took it to the Maker Faire, where we won a Best in Show award because we had a line of 100 people just constantly lined up to make their own, put them together, take them home. Originally created it for sororities, found out sorority girls don't want a kit. They want to slap something on their wall and then go to a party.
Yeah.
So at the Maker Faire, the biggest advocates were like 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds. And after working on it for a while, I went, that's cool, but I'm not reinventing an entire company around selling stuff to 7-year-olds. I'm in tech. I'm going back to tech. Now I know how to do this. I also made friends at Shutterfly and basically figured out, okay, now that you've made this product, how do you actually exit a product like this? And it required a video instruction guide because it was not really intuitive when you look at it, but you watch a 10-second clip, you're like, oh, that's how it works. And the final straw was going to Shutterfly where they're like, yeah, we would actually buy something like this, but it has to work without a video instruction guide. It has to work where someone looks at a piece of paper, instructions, and they understand how to do it. And I spent 30 days creating 30 different instruction guides, going out, testing them with strangers every day to just go, hey, can you take a quick look at this? Like, do you get how this works? And after 30 days of people going, just not going, they didn't know how it works, but like 90% of the time just like messing up and then getting frustrated. I was like, okay, we've exhausted every possible avenue. We're done.
Yeah. It's funny because, first of all, that story is just so representative of you as a person for how long I've known you, being that you're so diligent about this consumer research before you jump into anything. And what are you looking for? I mean, obviously, that's kind of a vague question, but there's a certain answer that we're trying to get, or a certain no, or something that's going to lead us to the next thing. What are you looking for? Are you just blitzing them with questions until you figure it out?
You're looking for a pattern. I worked at a design research firm in San Francisco right after I got out of college. And I always asked them, how do you know when to stop interviewing people? Because they would interview 20, 30 different people across the country about the best use of Brita pictures. I'm like, yeah, what are you looking for? Yeah. And their answer was, once you talk to 7 people who have really nothing in common and you get similar answers from them, then you've talked to enough people because you've taken it down from, you're always trying to find out, like, what is the existential crisis going on in their life? Mm-hmm. Why are they going to take action? What is the pain that they're in? Mm-hmm. And does this solve their pain?
Well, when you say different people, are they like 7 different? What do you mean different? Because the formula is to find, a very specific niche market. The riches are in the niches. But what, when you say different, are they, how are they different?
So when I was working at that firm, yes, they basically use userinterview.com or whatever it was called to find 7 Midwestern families that have 2 kids that live in this.
Have the time to do.
Sure, exactly. I've always started not exactly knowing what the product's going to be. Sure. And so everything's a breadth first search and then a depth first search, where if you talk to a businessman and you're like, are you going to use this? And he goes, I love this. Yes. And then you just go down that. Well, the person who works at Starbucks might benefit 10 times from it, but you've never even spent the time to talk to them. So I try to do this thing where I hop across a couple different job roles, ecosystems, whatever it is, and see if people have that pain. And then if you start hearing the same type of pain across a couple different ecosystems, who's in the most pain, and then go down that rabbit hole and interview those people. Yeah. But you are right. You have to start with a niche. You can't start everywhere, be everything to everyone.
Yeah. One thing that's always impressed me was when I first met you was your ability to, it's funny because now the term's cliche, but like growth hacking. And you're the first person I was like, oh, that's what that means. And describe to you what you define as growth hacking. What's the purpose of it? Who are you attracting or looking for? What are the mechanics that make a good growth hack engine?
Growth hacking is just a non-conventional way to get in touch with people who might want to use your product. And so you can do traditional marketing, social media. Everybody's using those channels. They know what they are. And so the alpha is played out. You're going to pay whatever the CPM is, the cost per click that has been determined. So growth hacking is just, okay, well, what non-conventional ways exist? Are you going to a new conference website that doesn't know yet that they shouldn't allow you to message every single person in the website for free. And then you're using that channel to get in front of the people that you want to get in front of for a lower cost or a higher conversion. So it can be anything. Growth hacking could literally be going to events, which probably doesn't scale as much, but it's a non-conventional way. And maybe you're reaching an audience that goes to events and nobody else shows up to weekly sanitation meetings for the town hall. Like, it's just, where do you find these people? What makes a good growth hack? It's going to sound stupid, but like, it working. I don't know. In marketing, there's this thing where people say, like, I'm wasting 70% of the money that I'm spending on marketing. I just wish I knew which 70% it was, and then I could hone in on it. For growth hacking, you only need to be successful like 10% of the time. It's kind of like venture capital, where 9 out of 10 of the growth hacks you do are probably going to fail. It's, how do you set up front what your expectation is and how long it's going to take you to confirm or deny that your expectation is reality, and then take that hypothesis through to conclusion. And if it takes you a week to find a new data source, talk to new people, figure out if they like it, and then confirm that's a bad data source, well, you spent a week of your time, but in 10 weeks, you might find something that returns 1,000 times better than a paid ad campaign. You just have to be very quantitative with what you're doing.
How many companies do it well?
How many companies?
Do you know?
I don't know. Like, I've talked to a lot of growth hackers, and they all have different tips and tricks. My actually biggest question for those people is, how many of them are actually doing what they say they're doing? Because you talk to people in San Francisco who go, yeah, we set up an API where you come to our website, we find out what your zip code is, we send you a cup of coffee in the mail that asks for like a chat online or whatever, and has a super high conversion rate because, people aren't expecting to get a coffee in the mail. And you go listen to these people talk and you go, is this just something that sounds really good and you're really a motivational speaker? Or have you ever actually put this into practice where it's actually worked? And it's hard to know.
You see it online with a lot of people who promote their strategies or formulas or tactics, but you never are. It's never clear. One of your recent experiences, which I always find fascinating, is you had the opportunity to scale like these engineering teams and Scrum teams in a really unconventional new market in Web3, and it's challenging just to hire one engineer and maintain one kind of workflow. How do you maintain all of it, and how do you know how to put teams together when you were kind of building them for different products, applications? What was that like?
That's a very long answer. I don't know. We should probably break this into phases. How did you find the people in the first place? Let's answer that.
Web3 talent in particular is just super challenging because all the technology is new, and those who are experienced in it either took a few courses on Udemy or Codemy or Codecademy or whatever. Others are actually super experienced and have been developing for a while.
Yeah. So the answer is, we taught a lot of people. A lot of people think that Web3 programming is just programming smart contracts. I'm sure those people cost $300,000-$400,000 a year if you can find them. But that's just one small piece of the stack of most of these applications. The rest of the applications are the front ends, the like ETL pipelines, the etc. And all of that can be programmed in languages that people already know. You're just fitting them into the stack. So how we found people is essentially, we broke out, to make a Web3 application, you need about 9 layers. And one layer is the smart contracts, and all the middle layers can be done in Node.js, and the top layers can be done in React. So we just hired the best React and Node.js developers, and then a couple smart contract developers. The smart contract developers were definitely the hardest to find, mostly because of honesty, where we basically went to some firms and they're like, you want to write a smart contract that does X. It's going to take us 3 weeks to build it. And I was like, okay, I guess that's reasonable because I don't really know anything about smart contracts. Let's do that. And then after talking to enough people in the field, I hired a very smart contract developer who was from a foreign country, wasn't really connected to anyone else, maybe didn't have the precedent of like, this is what you're supposed to charge or tell people. And he basically went, oh, you want me to write this contract, which is the same one I gave to someone else? That'll take me 3 hours. And I went, okay, like, what are you going to charge me? This. And then it came back and it worked. And it was, okay, like, you just have to talk to enough people to pin them against each other. The second thing for finding very smart app development, let's start with React, was basically never giving someone the option to fail. You go to someone, you say, how much is it going to cost to build this application? And they go, $5,000. And how long is it going to take? 3 weeks. Great. Okay. We raised money. We're in a position where we have the ability to add more support resources if you need them. Just let us know if you need them. Also, we work on 3 basic principles: communication, action, and execution. And you tell them all of this up front, which is communication. We should never miss a deadline because we don't know that we're going to miss a deadline. We have the ability to add more resources. And if you're incapable of doing what you say you're doing, our timelines are what are most important to us. So we will add more resources to make sure it's done in that time frame. Action is just, if you have enough information to get started, don't wait for 100% information, because you doing 50% of the right thing with 50% of the information will get us to that timeline faster than you having done nothing and needing to speed up at the end. Right. And then execution is just, can you do your job? Are you going to put me on the phone with the senior developer, and then I'm going to hire you and you're going to put me on the job with a junior developer who doesn't actually know what they're doing, but you did the interview? And if you can communicate and take action, we can force execution or teach you execution. And then I had a lot of app developers where they couldn't build it in time. They basically said it's going to take 3 weeks, put a junior developer on it. And 2.5 weeks in, they're like, yeah, we're not going to be done in the next, half a week. And I'm like, great, what's left? And like, half of it. I'm like, okay, give me what you've given me, or give me everything you've done so far. I'm going to go hire somebody else who's going to finish the second half. You can try to finish the second half. You do only have 4 days left though. And, we paid you this chunk up front and this chunk because you said you could do this timeline. So I'm going to go do it elsewhere. And just saying that, a lot of them would then put their senior developers on and actually get it done instead of prioritizing some other work that they already sold and then not paying attention to you, because you're kind of indicating that I don't need you. It'd be nice to work together, but I want to work with people who keep to their promises.
Like
a firm.
Yeah. This is when you have kind of an external team, and
I did a lot of external teams for the React front ends, which was
external teams are hard to manage.
They are hard to manage. So that's that. Let's talk about internal. So hiring Node.js developers, essentially for blockchain, nobody knows anything about blockchain. And so we actually hired people for 4 10-hour days a week. So still 40 hours, but 10 hours a day, so that you could spend an hour a day educating them on different pieces of blockchain infrastructure. 1 hour blocks to educate every single day. And we actually did that probably for about 2 months. So that's 20 out, 40, how many days are in a month? 30? 60 hours. I'm good at math. Of education of blockchain stuff for about 100 people, or probably for like 60 people who are going through that education program. So when people ask like, how did you find like 60 educated blockchain people? We made them. I'm like, well, how was it worth it? Because one, there was a week where I spent 20 minutes on the phone with every single person on our team, 119 people. That was 60 hours of being on the phone. And I jumped on and everyone thought they were getting fired. Everyone was like, why does the CEO want to talk or the COO want to talk specifically to me? And I jump on and be like, hi, this is a good call. We really appreciate having you on your team. Really just want to figure out like why you joined, what your motivations are, where you see yourself growing, etc. And half the people joined because they went, well, I'm this type of developer, but I want to stay current with the newest technology. I want to learn blockchain, this, that, the other thing. I'm like, great, we have different buckets for blockchain infrastructure. What are you interested in learning? Like, they're like, well, smart contracts for fun, but really I'd probably be best at this. Great, we're going to teach you how to do what you're best at. And then, you can join this other call if you want to learn about smart contracts on the side. But really what we're paying you for is this. And just being heard and being able to learn exactly what they wanted to learn made them that much more dedicated to the team of, great, I get to do exactly what I'm passionate about, what I want to work on, and I'm being educated.
That's just setting the tone for how things should operate as a team culture-wise. And that doesn't go unnoticed because, when you don't set the tone as a founder early on, then you have all of these issues that come on themselves. And the piece about communication, I think, is so worthy of emphasizing because of that, setting the tone, having the expectations, delivering, and then it kind of cascades into everything that you're building.
Right. And we kind of talked about that for agencies, but the same thing is exactly true of people. So when we were hiring people, we actually hired on a 24-hour challenge about 590 people. And what that means is Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time, New York City, I would hop on the internet, mostly used Upwork and some other platforms. We used freelancer.com for design, but that was kind of a separate pattern of how we hired. For Upwork, I would hop on, and around the world, I'd put up like 5 job posts that were Node.js developer for this, React developer for that, Node.js developer for something else, and see what people applied to. And it would say, we're going to hire you on a 24-hour challenge. Here is 3 weeks worth of work that we need done. What's your hourly rate? Great. For as many hours as you want to work in the next 24 hours, we will pay you that hourly rate for 3 hours, for 8 hours, whatever it is. You want to work all 24 hours? I'll pay you, but I'm not going to hire you because you're full of it. Yeah. There's no way you can do that.
Helpfully.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You wouldn't want to at all.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. And what I would find is we would want to hire 1 Node.js developer, or actually we hired very quickly. So we probably wanted to hire 4 Node.js developers by Monday, and it's Friday. We'd hired 15 Node.js developers, and half of them would say, my hourly rate is X, and I'm mid-level and I'm just getting started. And the next day they come back and say, I worked 8 hours, and you'd look at it and go, yeah, it looks like you did 8-10 hours worth of work, maybe a little better than I expected. We'll see. I'll get back to you after I negotiate with the 20 other people that are here. And then on the flip side, what you'd have is, oh yeah, I'm a CTO at a startup in Paris, and I'm kind of bored. I'm looking for something to work on the weekend. I'm not going to leave my job because it's a great job, but I saw your post. It looks like a fun side project. I'd like to work this weekend. Let's go for it. They'd come back the next day and go, well, I have a wife, I have kids. I wasn't able to work more than 3 hours on it. And be like, okay, well, show me what you did. Yeah. And you take a look at it and go, well, you did 2 weeks worth of work in 3 hours. So what was your hourly rate? Yeah. 3 times what everyone else was charging. You can work with us anytime. Just step in, build it, go from there. Yeah. And you'd talk to them also. You'd say, this is also communication, action, execution. Communication is, you're going to tell me exactly what you did the next day. And this is going to work if you're honest with me of how many hours this actually took you, because I'm going to expect a similar output. This is setting the tone for everything. It's essentially when you get a job at a larger company and someone hires you on contract for a month, and then they see what you're capable of, and then they hire you full time. I'm a huge proponent of doing that any day over 6 character interviews, a reference, and then you get there the first day and your boss finds out that you can't actually do anything that you said that you could do. And so, that just really worked to scale quickly, because you're kind of starting at the end. You figured out they can execute. Now you just have to figure out, can they communicate as part of a team, and do they take action when they're not, when you don't know?
Scheduling, and the challenge is now on you to make everything work well,
But you kind of know they're going to fit, because you also know they take action. They didn't have to do this. They chose a random project over the weekend, and they decided how many hours they were going to work and what their schedule was like. So if they worked 10 hours and they accomplished 10 hours worth of work, okay, they're going to be a hard worker. If they accomplish 2 hours, it might be a little harder to schedule with them. But when you do get the time with them, they're the hit team. They're going to get it.
One thing I want you to kind of unpack a little bit more is the whole hiring kind of process in regards to contract, full-time. You kind of touched on it for a second, but a lot of founders struggle, because I ran agency for forever. And then a lot of founders struggle really with identifying the right way to hire, whether it's contract, find out if somebody can work, actually committing to someone for some, either if it's a prideful thing. Honestly, there's a lot of founders that pridefully, I will never hire anyone contract. If you're part of our team, you're part of our team. It's a little unreasonable in my book, but does it depend on the type of person, on how you want to hire them and bring them on? And when do you bring them on? When are you shown enough to where you feel okay, they can contribute, they've executed consistently?
Okay, answering your question, when do you hire contract, when do you hire full time?
Yeah,
I can't really do the Venn diagram, because I've always hired contract.
Yeah.
So when I was working on a small team of 8 people previously, everyone was contractors. Everyone was working remote all around the world. Yeah. You kind of can't hire them full time, because how employment laws work in different countries, it wouldn't mean anything. Yeah. They wouldn't be able to enforce it. They'd still kind of be a contractor. Here also, everyone was across the world. So maybe a fourth of the team was in the United States. They could have been hired full time, but everyone else couldn't be anyway. So,
and then when is that? Okay, so when you hire people contractor, and when do you decide what have they shown you or contributed to the project where you feel confident they can?
it's different per role. So hiring a Node.js developer, I mean, you can know in that 24-hour challenge, 3 hours, is this person really good at what they do? They're an individual contributor. I can give them a project, know it'll be executed, know that it will be modular. I can break it apart, change it. It'll be great. Hiring a scrum master or something like that, you can't test someone until they actually, get put in the field and talk to people. So that took about maybe a week or a week and a half to know if someone was going to be a good fit. And those were some of the largest bets that we made, where I hired a scrum master and I fired him the next day. Why? Because I hired him, he joined a team, and he fired someone on the team on the first day. I was like, you don't even know this person. You don't have the authority to do this. This is not going to work out.
Well, that's an obvious, but when you reflect on other experiences with Scrum Masters in particular, or someone with a skill set that you have to take a little bit longer to, understand their level of ability, what patterns are bad Scrum Masters or people who are in those roles, and what patterns are, show good outside of obviously the communication, action, and execution?
Outside of that, I'm just being passionate about what you're actually building. So people who like what they're building will go up and above and beyond and over communicate with you because they're excited about something existing in the world. When you're hiring remote and you can't really see someone's facial expression, you don't really know, but you can kind of figure out that someone who's just there to collect a paycheck is doing the bare minimum work. Is probably also working like 2 other contracts online. And so, if they're passionate, they're over communicating, they're dedicated. And if they're just doing the bare minimum, when push comes to shove or something goes wrong, they're probably not going to put that much more effort into it. But as far as like when exactly, I don't know. I mean, it was kind of different for each person.
One thing that's always been interesting to unpack with founders is like the co-founder relationship and finding a balance between what someone's good at, both you, yourself, and them, and complementing that, and then broadcasting that to the team and going through and making sure everyone knows what they're doing, how to execute. Is that something, you and your co-founders, over time have always checked in with each other? Is it a maturity thing, an experience thing? What allows you and your co-founder to really kind of work together, know each other's skill set, and delegate and know kind of who has authority in which direction? Because it sometimes gets blurred,
It does. Somebody just asked me the other day, they're like, so who has authority over fundraising? Like, it seems like it's been both of us. Like, no, one person has to be the decision maker or like be responsible. Or if the whole thing fails, it's one person's fault. I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure how I feel about that, but okay. Seems like, I don't know. This is going to sound cliche, but every co-founder relationship is kind of like a marriage. You spend more time with that person than anybody else. So just thousands of hours of conversations, you learn what each other are good at, and you just have to not be afraid of calling the other person out. As far as like delegating who is exactly doing what, at the small scale, it just seems like you're doing everything necessary to survive. And I don't know that I've ever done it correctly, where at the beginning you kind of delegate who's going to do what. I think in this current venture, having talked to enough investors where they go, look, you need to just show up the first day and whiteboard all the things you're ever going to say no to. So that if Walmart wants to come invest and you already said you're going to say no to them, you're never going to take their money. And then also delegate, or split up who's good at what so that and write down every single responsibility inside a company and assign a person's name to it. I'll probably do that the next time, but you don't really know what detrimental effects it will have until you get into what you're doing. That's kind of getting started. At scale, I think it was easier. We scaled up and we had as many as about 196 individual contributors with agencies. I'd say there's about 119 people directly like in an org chart. And that was kind of easier because I did a bunch of org chart research and kind of had 2 leadership tracks. One was the engineering leadership track, and one was the operationalizing, making sure it gets done or track. And you had overlap where we had all hands meetings like every other day, where there would be 80 to 119 people on there, depending on schedules, for about 20 minutes. And then maybe once a week for like an hour, where we would tell the entire company what everybody else was working on. And at one point we had about 19 scrum teams of 6 people. So we'd have each team like present something that they'd done that week so that everybody else knew what everyone else was capable of and if they were succeeding, what they were succeeding at.
What were they building at that time?
For the scrum teams? Yeah. So we started the scrum teams actually to teach people how to build blockchains, where I think actually like one of the best exercises we did was we spent a week and we went, we're not building any of our core product for the next week.
Yeah.
Every single person is going to be put on a team, whether they're a virtual assistant or a product manager or a key developer. And we split them up where it was like 2 Node.js developers, a React developer, some random person from HR or something else or from recruiting. And you together, your 6 people are going to, here's a bunch of resources on YouTube. You're going to build Bitcoin from the ground up. And I think what was amazing is at the end of the week, we actually had 5 teams that were basically able to rebuild like Bitcoin from the ground up, knowing all the resources that were out there.
Sure.
And then from that, you could take those 5 teams and the people on them that you knew were the highest performing and split them across all the other teams. Mm-hmm. And then we started building small modular chunks of larger blockchain infrastructure with each of those teams, which was really important to break down a blockchain app into, there's like 5 or 6 different tiers, like a front end, an ETL pipeline, an indexer, an RPC node that can write to the network in parallel much faster, the contracts themselves. Because as we were building the connectors and the components, then we could split across those 19 scrum teams, different components. If something was critical and it needed to be done in one day because you created a huge dependency tree and nothing else could be tested until it was done, we gave it to 5 teams. And by the 80-20 rule, one of those teams was able to accomplish it in one day. And the other 4 were like, how is this even possible? Yeah. And you'd be like, okay, well, we got it done. So it doesn't matter. Move on to the next thing.
Yeah. That's such high velocity, dude. In like week spans, you're building like almost MVP products. And each week, how do you maintain that level, not only just you, but your team, that level of output?
I don't think you're stressing people to the max. You're just starting with a priority matrix from the very beginning, where if there's 100 components that go into something to make this operating system, to be honest, then for each of those components, what are the subcomponents? What are the subcomponents? And you're creating the entire architecture first of starting at the beginning. What do you need to build first to test, to prove that it works, to move on to the next thing? And then you have a layout of like, these are the 2,000 components that need to be done. And so to maintain the velocity, you're showing the incremental success of this component's done. Awesome. Like that's off of it. And then also working from the beginning, these first 5 components are done and they can work together and you can see it actually working. That's awesome. And then just breaking it up so that people are working on something new and exciting every so often. It's not where someone asks you to build the front end of a website. You've got 6 months to do it and 3 months in, you're like, I'm bored. I want to move to the next thing. It's so micro that you're like, great, new challenge. It's like being a consultant where you get to go into a new business every week. So I think that's some of the things that kept up excitement. Also, just touching back on that's so fast. I don't know that I would actually build this way again without massive funding to work in this manner. And because everything was optimized for time, it wasn't money efficient. It was time efficient. And probably 40% of what you're doing is going to waste, because when you give 5 teams something to work on and 4 of them create stuff that isn't going to work, and you just set that aside and you go with the one team that did work, well, you just paid people to do a bunch of work that just was complete waste, and they know it was waste and they can move on to the next thing. And you split up the team. So if one team was successful, then you split up those 2 successful people so they can work with other teams to hopefully teach them how to be successful, to improve their outlook. But unless you're going to do that crazy fashion, you should probably just really start with like from there.
Yeah, it's very unique to, I think, what you were building in your situation. And even just shifting gears here to think about kind of the broader landscape. We talk a lot about technologies that are emerging, trends. I think what I like to talk to you a lot about will, kind of sense to things.
Always? Okay.
Optimistic,
practical, for sure.
Realistic, whatever. What I mean by that is you like to figure out how things can work, how can they maximize their potential in whatever environment that is, and how can you replicate different environments to then So again,
Mm-hmm.
what out there right now is really exciting to you that you're a person not working on, but that you're keeping an eye out? Obviously, there's AI, it's popular. There's machine learning models that are getting exciting and interesting. Web3. I mean, what
That I'm excited about? I mean, the biggest thing that I'm excited about that I'm not working on is eVTOLs, which are basically electric vertical takeoff and landing air taxis, but not like a car that turns into a taxi, basically just like miniature electric helicopters. Why am I not working on it? Well, kind of left that track behind when I graduated college. I worked on autonomous robotics, and then I went into I'm going to build SaaS software because pixels are cheap, atoms are expensive, and I want to work on something that you can figure out if it's going to work in a week instead of 20 years. I still love it though, and keep up with, the Joby Aviations of the world who are creating all this new software where, just for example, sure, you can build an air taxi. Great. Kind of done. There's a lot of people who have done it, but you have to figure out how far is it going to actually fly? Is it going to fly half a mile or is it going to fly 100 miles? And therefore your design goes into how to make it most fuel efficient for that range. How's it going to be manufactured? A lot of these things are 3D printed metal structures where you can't see inside it. And so you can't tell if someone sabotaged it during the construction process. And so you need new file formats to prove and attest that exactly what was in the CAD model is exactly what got printed. And I can line it up with the exact files. And I know that the file wasn't tampered with.
What will allow that to happen?
I think they're working on it already. Like, I could talk about technology that I know of that could allow it to happen, which is kind of related to what I'm doing, but they probably have their own software to do that. They already have the printers. I don't know exactly what they're using. It's a lot of like the DoD type stuff where people will be excited if you talk to them at their company, but they're not going to give you their trade secrets. I don't know. That's what I find super exciting. And I've always thought about going back into it, but it'd probably be like a year's worth of education to get caught up. And then it is a 10 or 20 year commitment because also there's just a lot of regulation. Like there's in LA, there's about 75 helicopter pads on the tops of buildings. They're not allowed to be used.
Really?
Only for emergencies, because landing a helicopter full of gasoline on a building is more dangerous than it's worth. Like, hey, if you light this building on fire, no. With eVTOLs, because they're all electric, they could be used because they're not worried about lighting stuff on fire. And, the worst thing that could happen is you actually just crash the helicopter and building's fine. There's, the timelines with the engineering. There's also just the timelines with people being okay with that. Do people want helicopters flying by their windows if they live on the 50th floor? Probably not. They have to buy curtains now and they don't want that.
What's interesting is, we went to that conference recently, called Build. And one thing that was fascinating to me, only because of kind of recent news with SVB and obviously, VC capital has just gotten more tight because of, whatever, people know the reasons. But it's interesting that the mentality hasn't changed for a lot of founders. Like a lot of them, when I was talking, were still looking to, raise money and then build teams, but it was kind of unnecessary. How do you view fundraising now after going through so many rounds? How do you intentionally deploy that capital? And when do you decide, okay, I need to raise money? This is not something I can hack my way through.
What do you mean by they wanted to raise money, but it was unnecessary? You're saying they
just
could
like building products,
built a prototype.
It was like one person was launching an app along with their service, but their service was perfectly functional. I don't want to go into detail because I don't want to be burned by a founder. But it was like, building an app team to build an application. And they had so many different product lines that weren't really delivering well. But now that they had capital, it seemed like they were trying to put everything in every
They were trying to do everything? Yeah. I went to, I forget what the investment company was, but it was at Union Square Ventures, I think, an event where this guy just gave a presentation. He went, you just have to focus on one thing. And it's so obvious. But as you start building something that can go into more and more markets and having conversations with people from the gaming industry or the film industry to banks, and everybody wants it, you have to decide who you say no to. And I don't know, that's just very hard. But so how do you decide when to raise capital?
When do you personally now decide when to raise capital? What are some signals you see? And then two, what's your first deployment of that capital?
Like, what are you going to build with that?
Are you hiring engineers? Are you hiring a team? Are you buying a new infrastructure? Are you reinvesting in a whole new version of your application. Obviously, those come with the situation, but
I mean, it's hard to answer that for a general case because like we started with a large infusion of capital. And so later on at different stages, you have to show traction. You have to show POCs will actually work for large enterprise customers. So personally, raising money to fulfill those POCs to show the traction to get to the next stage. I don't know that that helps someone who's just starting a company though. Hey, you should raise money, when you have a proof of concept that somebody wants. But maybe I bootstrapped my previous startup for 3 years, never took money from anyone. We built about 5 products. We made about, I don't know, between $30,000 and $50,000 a month doing contracting work for other people, and then infused all of that into building products. Could you move as quickly? No. Did we build stuff that other people beat us to market because they could just build it with a much larger team? Yes. Would I raise capital in the future? Yes. If you're good at something, you should have someone pay you to do it. And raising capital is kind of, doing that. What would I build first? Prototype. I'm always a huge advocate of sell it before you build it. I would actually invest in...
Sell it before you build it. Interesting.
In San Francisco, I made a bunch of hypothetical videos of technology. No one knew that they were hypothetical. And I didn't claim that they were true. I just let people assume what they wanted to assume.
It's such a Ross thing to do. I love this.
It's research. I made an Amazon Alexa powered vending machine video where I actually went into the Amazon loft because I'm good at making friends with people. And I said, can I use your vending machine? And can I record here after hours when no one's here so it won't be as loud? And this is what I'm going to do. And the janitor probably was confused as I was just screaming at a vending machine. I was like, Alexa, what do you have that's keto diet related? And then, great, I'll take one of those. And he's like, but it didn't say anything. What do you want? And then I went home and in post-production using After Effects, I would Alexa, what do you have that's keto diet?
What years was this, by the way?
2018, maybe?
Yeah.
It was when voice was cool.
The tech influencers, I would say that kind of content is, if I see it now, I'm like, oh yeah, it's funny, it's cool, interesting. Back then, I'm like, what the hell is going on? What is this guy doing?
I mean, there was influence. Maybe I was just in the heart of other people doing stuff like that, going to the growth hacker meetups in San Francisco. But there was people doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was hard to make stuff visual. So you can't sell this encryption technology, check out this encryption technology and here's the cool video that's going to show you that when you click this button, it's fully encrypted. You'll click the button, everyone's like, well, I guess I'll take your word for it, but how do I know? With the Amazon Alexa stuff or with robotics or any stuff like that, you make a video and someone looks at it and this is crazy. This is a real guy talking to a machine and it's talking back. It must exist. And from that, I got 40,000 views on that video. I got 12 people who reached out to me to license the technology. I had conversations with each of those 12 people to ask them how much it was worth. One of them was a vending machine company who wanted to embed it in their vending machines. But at the end of the day, I basically figured out that people were willing to spend about, of those 12 people, maybe $150,000 licensing the tech total. And so you do the calculation, you go, how much is it going to cost me to build? How into this am I? Okay, it's going to cost me $150,000 to build with some contractors. I'm not going to make any money off of it. And while it's a gimmick, it's not really that big of a business.
Sure.
Next.
Yeah.
And so you sell it before you build it. The funniest thing, though, was going to a hacker house where I met someone from the Google team.
Yeah.
And they basically said, yeah, I saw your video on LinkedIn. Google's decided to pass up on doing voice-activated vending machines because it's already been done. I was like, well, that's hilarious because it hasn't. And you could probably still put them out in the market.
That's just so funny, man. A lot of founders will touch on, certain times in their lives where they, ingested certain pieces of information, someone gave them a piece of advice. What were those key moments for you that you kind of still think back on now that have impacted the way you work, the passion, the why behind the stuff you do? Is there a person, a few people, what do they say? What was that share?
I mean, there's tons of people. I'm trying to think of the specifics.
Yeah. If you sat down to do something today, is there a mantra? Is there something that kind of, if you need to get some motivation or get some energy or inspiration that you think back on?
I don't think that I think to like any one thing, but what I think of is I just ingest a lot of information. I'm not great with names, and so I don't remember all of the people who said all of the things that I exactly read. But to your like people saying stuff specific points in your career, I have definitely read the same book 3 times in my career, and it's meant something completely different to me every single time I read it. Like I read Ben Horowitz's book. I think is that 0 to 1 or is that another one? And I read it before I started a startup. And then I read it 3 years later, like the week after my startup failed. And I was like, oh, that's what he meant. Like, but until you go make all the mistakes, you just don't know. And so there's a lot of stuff in that book that like, I'm not going to make those same mistakes again. I don't exactly know what it was, but you come across a situation, you know, not to trip over that pothole because you've seen it before. I don't know. Also just like, you know, what gives me motivation? I wrote on my laptop and had it there for like 6 years. I need to like write on this laptop, but it's too pristine. I don't want to do it. Just have an impact, increase the standard of living for 1 million people. I think it was a longer phrase. It was like have a positive impact on the standard of living for 1 million people plus. And so whenever I, you know, thinking about what am I going to do next, it's great. How am I going to continue toward this goal? I've built technology that has affected millions of people. Has it increased the standard of living yet? I don't think that we're there yet. So it's still a goal of mine. And that just gives me motivation of how do you do something at scale? And that's kind of why I didn't want to build mechanical engineering stuff, because maybe you build a part of a rocket, but you're building the one screw that goes in the seat of the one rocket for 20 years. Or you talk to people who work in labs who go, you know, I'm building stuff that the benefits of it aren't even going to be seen for 3 generations after I'm gone. So I'm like, okay, how in my lifetime can I do something that has an impact that I can see on this number of people? And that just gives me motivation because I kind of know there's some paths toward it. Are they all going to work out? I don't know. But it's what I want to do.
You've had such a privilege to, you talked about earlier, hire engineers and build teams, and always seems like remotely, you know, and that's kind of always been your lifestyle. What are some...
I would love to work in person, if I'm being honest.
But one thing, just because a big purpose of this podcast is to really encourage and support and help people.
I would love to work remote. Sorry about that.
What are some of the qualities that make like really good remote team members? What are some of the habits that they have? Because I feel like habits build consistency, and consistency builds reputation. When you have a good, strong sense of reputation, then you can have, you know, more say in companies. People know who you are. They acknowledge your contributions and things like that. What are the habits for those, you know, really successful employees, the people that are detrimental to teams? What are those habits that you've seen? How can people implement those for their work today? What are the habits for those people that are critical to your company's success?
Looking back at the people that were the most successful that I hired, who I didn't even know what they were going to become. One was just organized. I had people who, there was an awesome guy named Andrew that used to work for us who lived in Europe, and he came to work one day and he went, here's my spreadsheet of the 50 things that are going to go into this project. How many keep track of if they're working or not? You know, who is responsible for each one? And here's a link to each of the codes that we can check up on it. I was like, great. Like, I can't look over your shoulder and, you know, massage, like, you know, exactly what we're going to look at. So to have the spreadsheet, amazing. The second thing that Andrew had going for him was he could educate people and mentor them and had no ego about, like, you come across people at all different points in their lives. They're joining a new company for a reason. If they left a previous company, maybe they don't have the highest self-esteem because there was some sort of failure, but they're really good. And so he was really good at taking those people, building them up inside the organization, making them feel like part of a family, part of a team, and, you know, working from there. And then hiring people. So you need to expand your team at some point. If you can take a technical person in a technical role and they're building stuff, but then they can also easily replicate themselves. Like, you can say, hey, we're going to put you in the last part of the hiring process. And once we've figured out that this person is capable and et cetera, you're going to figure out, do you actually want to work with this person? And you're going to be part of the final decision. And if they can make good decisions and find other people that, you know, make the team stronger, then it gets stronger. I would still work with him. The reason that we don't work with him is the Ukraine war, where a lot of people that we were working with in Europe had other priorities that they needed to address. Yeah. Like that's one of the main examples that I didn't even really know him when we started. Yeah. And he just displayed these qualities that I went, this guy is going to be instrumental to bringing everyone together and making this successful.
Yeah. Founders talk about it all the time, just how much that one core person is so valuable to their team because they encompass the other members. And I talked to a founder recently and they were like, I don't know whether or not I want to fire this person. Their output isn't the best, but they're the best communicator and encourager for everybody.
And that's what you need. Yeah. Sometimes you need to just come, like with 119 people, there's definitely people on the team who didn't do as much as they should. Sure. But they're the grease. Right. And they are getting everybody else to do what they need to do. And, you know, they're talking too much, but because they're talking, they're encouraging everyone else to communicate. And sometimes you have to be okay with that. If it's a team of 5 people and you really just need to execute, you might not need the grease. You just need to push forward. But
how are you networking now? What are you doing?
What do you mean by networking? Like just
going out, meeting people, doing stuff, seeing things. There's less to do nowadays.
Is there?
Is there?
I mean, I could go to an event every single day if I could actually keep up with it. Last week was a big blockchain conference. Yeah. Was that last week? Or was that like last month? Oh my gosh, that was last week.
I think so.
Yeah. So that was events every single day. I usually don't go to the main conferences. I usually just go to all of the after events. Mm-hmm. And then, so went to a couple of those, went to a couple of living forever events, like people who are really into science that's going to help expand human life. Yeah. Went to the Build Summit, which was just New York City founders. The more groups that I get into with New York City founders, the more different, like, what's it called, industries people are in, who tell me about other events that they're going to that are kind of tangential. Like, went to some cybersecurity events, which are tangential to blockchain, which are tangential to whatever. Yeah, just show up. You never really know who you're going to meet at any of these events. Yeah. I recently met someone in the film industry who I didn't know that I was going to meet them, had a 3-hour conversation, ignored everybody else at the event. And that spurred off everything. And it wasn't an event specifically for film. I kind of, it's going to sound weird. When I was dating in San Francisco, I optimized for intelligent and then I filtered for motivated. Yeah. And it didn't work at all. So you go to all these like tech events. Yeah. You're like, oh, you work at Google. Like, you know, I want someone who's intelligent. Yeah. You know, let's see if you're motivated. When I flipped it and I optimized for motivated and then I filtered for intelligent, it worked amazing. Wow. And motivated was going to 6 a.m. running clubs, just meeting people at 6 a.m. running clubs that, you know, if you're willing to get up this early and, you know, you're going to take care of yourself, you clearly have more motivation than most people. Yeah. And then figuring out what they do. So also some of the best events that I found are like morning running clubs. Like there's a pitch and run where you talk to a bunch of investors over running early in the morning on Chelsea Pier. And those tend to be very high quality people.
I really don't know how to end this, man. It's been such a pleasure always talking to you. I mean, we built such a friendship. You connected me with my co-founder, who I'm eternally grateful for.
I've enjoyed this conversation. I can imagine other people would enjoy listening to it. I'm like, okay, this brought up a bunch of stories that I didn't even remember. Yeah. When I was in San Francisco, I went to 6 different countries for work. And I came back and I was like, yeah, I wrote up the list of 45 stories that I could tell in a bar from these other countries. And I told one of my best friends, and my best friend went, most people don't have like 5 stories they can tell. How do you have 45? And I'm like, because I just put myself in these random situations.
I just had a conversation with one of my friends about like, because he was having kind of a life crisis, figuring out the next thing to do in terms of just like overall in his life. And I was like, what stories do you want to tell at the end of the day? When somebody talks to you, what do you want to say? When you get older, what are the things that you want to bestow upon? Like, stories are everything, man.
My favorite question for people when I go to a party or something like that, and some people get awkward, but some people love it, is just, hey, I'm Ross. What do you wish people would ask you about? And then they're like, and I'm like, it's, if they stall, I'm like, I'm basically giving you permission to brag. Yeah. Like, you know, what topic do you wish would come up because you're passionate about talking about it? But you can't just randomly interject like in the middle of a conversation about where people grocery shop, like, yo, like, what do you guys know about drones? And they're like, huh?
Honestly, I'm more interested in the grocery shopping conversation because finding the right produce is really hard in New York City.
See, I'm not interested in that at all. I don't want to insult you with that, but
No, it's good.
for a good price, it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go to Whole Foods, but whole paycheck.
Yeah.
In San Francisco, it's Grocery Outlet Bargain Market.
Yeah.
Their motto was literally Grocery Outlet Bargain Market.
Yeah.
It's like, buy it today. It might not be here tomorrow.
Yeah, because it's expired the next day.
Exactly. And that's
But-
how you get 50 fruit cups for 10 cents a piece. And can you eat them in one day? No.
I don't know. I think we're gonna get kicked out soon, but yeah, man, it's been such a pleasure. You're somebody that really inspires me to take action, and doing this and doing it on a short timeline, being so willing to bring your own equipment and things like that.
Yeah.
It really just, I love you as a friend, as a person, as an entrepreneur. I really find a lot of inspiration from you, and I'm sure we'll have more conversations like this, but thanks, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Thanks for putting this together. I really enjoyed it.
You want to talk on Wednesday?
Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you're curious to hear more, we're going to be doing more live interviews in New York City, as well as remote interviews with experts across the world. So stay tuned and let us know if there's anyone you would like us to interview next.